All right, now we're live.
We're live. Johann
Yeah.
Gratz. This is Christian, aka Kyle Alander, and I invited him on my channel here to talk about his latest series on quantum hermeticism. Now, as you guys might have known, I had a video earlier this year called "Could Autonomous Agents Lie Beneath Emergent Space-Time?" and I had this whole kind of thing set up. And then a little while later, someone made a blog. I was sent a blog by someone who was, the blog was claiming that the physics in the video was identical to hermetic occult science. And this is kind of weird, right? I mean, I've seen people make claims about this before, about me before, my video before. But I saw this and I'm like, there seemed to be parallels they were getting at, that were actually not just, coincidental parallels. And I got the book. Very interesting parallels in it. And I know you have it, Kyle, and you're actually making a video series on it right now.
Make it a whole, it's gonna be, so I at first I was kind of like hesitant at first because like if I get this out, people are gonna they'll think I'm crazy or something like that. So I was like, okay, well, if I approach it from a scientific perspective, right? If I don't mention the Hermeticism directly, but I kind of bring in the science behind it, then maybe people won't be so closed-minded. And that's what I kind of did in my introduction, where I was like, yes, some of this stuff may be weird per se. They may be dismissed as superstition, right? Because that's typically what these things are. Like, they're just not talked about. Like, it's only things that are discussed in religion, right? It's not really things that are discussed in scientific circles.
Speaking of religion, it's interesting because there has been for a long time, in like apologetics in general, and then later in the whole quantum idealism thing, talk to an atheist. I'm sure there's going to be some atheists in the comment section are going to say something like, "Well, the magic anyway, magic man in the sky, and you're stupid for believing." Now, the thing with that is, though, is we've done this before. I mean, IP has done this. I've done this where we make a scientific argument for God using the digital physics argument and so on, right? That's all sound, and that kind of is okay, right? Like it's like a okay zone.
Okay.
Even it's also in other circles say, "Oh, you're believing in fairy tales and so on," right? And then it still has kind of a social acceptability to it, despite the fact that they're going to lump that in with, magic and fairy tales and the magic man in the sky and so on. It has a kind of social acceptability that things that are seen as supernatural are not. But the irony here is that this whole development seems to be breaking down that kind of taboo, as it were.
No, it does. Well, because what it does is I'm not just arguing for God. So if you go to classical apologetics or just philosophy, religion in general, you're not going to really find things that argue for supernatural things. Like, you're not going to find an argument for why angels and demons exist. You're not going to find an argument for why, you're not going to find the sort of things that are described in religion. The only thing that you're really going to find an argument for is God, right? Because that's like, typically when it comes to religion, the existence of God is like the most socially acceptable thing, right? But what's not so socially acceptable are these other beings that exist out there per se, right?
Not just other beings, but other phenomena like an afterlife. Miracles to some extent, but like, for example, one thing that they pejoratively use, right? The magic man in the sky, right?
Yeah.
Sky fairy, okay? Well, in this here, I mean, what's being described, I mean, this is what the blog was claiming about my video, okay? Not what I was claiming about, but my blog was claiming about it. Was that what was being described in it was identical to what some people call occult magic, right?
Right.
So I'm like, I mean, you see the video, and someone even commented that, this is actually a very well presented video. It all follows, the science follows, everything is very, given conscious realism, conscious realism, everything follows out of the model, and the conscious realism model itself is pretty solid on, quantum cognition and emergent space-time. And then, but then at the same time, they're like, this is extremely dangerous, though, potentially. And it was very interesting to see it because, you've opened the Pandora's box here that is potentially what this blogger anyway is claiming to be identical to actual magic. You know?
Right. Well, it is. I mean, I've read the book, and I was at first I was really hesitant to. Sorry, what?
The whole thing. The
Yeah, I read the whole book, and I at first I was like I was really hesitant to actually like make a video series on it because I was like, if I get this out, people are going to either think I'm crazy or I'm going to lose my credibility or stuff like that. So I was like, okay, well, I'll approach it the same way that the book kind of approaches it, where yes, these things are again like supernatural, paranormal, but they can be rationally explained. So I'm not positing the existence of angels and demons and then saying we can't explain them, right? I'm actually using science to explain them. So I'm using. Sorry, what?
Skimmed of the book. From what I've skimmed of the book, it appears to be using the same kind of framework that me or spring philosophy are using.
It does,
like,
and it well actually it does, but it also it expands beyond that. Well, here's the thing:
watch IPs. What?
Yeah. So what it does is it kind of it uses that same framework, right? Where it's like this inner space and this outer space. It uses emergent space time, but it also goes beyond that because it also explains. Right, but it also explains like things like the fallen state. It also explains things like how prayer works, how free will works, right? And I know you've kind of discussed that in your videos, but this really goes into the details. But it also gets into occult science and things that you don't really discuss in your videos, right? Or you and IP have only kind of scratched the surface. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to what I plan to do basically is bring the full like picture out, basically the framework out. So I'll be able to explain not just I'm not be able to just explain like miracles and stuff like that, but also be able to explain angels and demons, like anything that has to do with the occult. I can explain from this.
I'm betting with the series when people see the series, they're going to, which is why I suggested you label them this way because they notice it's like a whole series and they're going to be like,
right.
We're going to get a lot of views on this. I'm going to guess like it's going to go viral at some point. I'm sure, maybe not right away, but at some point, just by people. One of those, not like instant viral, but one of those so slow viral where it's kind of like follows an exponential curve and it
right.
Like, real popular. You're probably going to get once it starts to build up. You're probably going to get a lot of interview requests from this.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to label it so each so like quantum hermeticism number 2, number 3, number 4, that'll kind of like, and then I'll also like each title, like subtitle is gonna be whatever I'm discussing in that video. So my next video is actually it's called quantum hermeticism number 4, Jung's collective subconscious. And what I mainly just explain how like there's this collective subconscious that kind of produces reality, right? So because under idealism, right, if you take the idealist view, everything comes.
Occult is dangerous, and that actually valid. So we're not.
Oh, yeah, your audio's.
Audio. This sucks. Oh, good grief. Is there any way to fix that? Hold on, I have a.
All right, well.
Hello? Hello? You there?
I'm here.
Hi, we had a little disruption problem. The internet was disrupted for a second. I'm going to try and set this up here, and I'm going to get a microphone in, hopefully to make this a little bit better. Hello, we back?
Yeah. Yeah.
Kyle, are you there?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Is the microphone helping at all?
A little bit, but not as much.
Is the microphone working?
Yeah, it's a little better.
Okay, hopefully this will do.
I think there's a.
I do apologize.
Okay,
for the
there we go.
audio.
Now it's really good. Now it's really
This
good.
is
All right, now it's really good.
kind
All right, you're good now.
Unfortunate. So yes, Ducky, yes, the occult is dangerous, and we are not at all advocating practicing it. This is simply a book that is.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like in my most recent video, I mentioned how, like, yes, there are supernatural beings out there. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Johanan. Okay, so in my most recent video, I mentioned how. Okay, so I mentioned how, like, yes, there are supernatural beings out there. They exist outside space and time, but just because they exist, that doesn't mean we worship them, right? So I want to make my point clear that just because there are supernatural beings that exist out there.
Purple Pill Philosophy. Be sure to give Hermes Trismegistus an honorable mention. Yep. That was mentioned at the beginning of the book. That is the mythological forerunner of Hermeticism, who is supposedly identical with the Egyptian god Thoth, and of course shows up in other mythologies as Mercury and Hermes and so on.
Right.
I think the Sumerians called him Ningishzida or something like that.
Okay, now I can hear you really good. So you're good now with the.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Zoltanus HN, what kind of idealism? We're dealing with objective idealism, which is actually maybe identical to Leibnizian idealism with the monadology and so on. So there's an objective reality. Okay, so it's not just, like people assume idealism means it's all subjective, and ontologically it's subjective, meaning it's made of subjective substance. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a reality that objectively exists beyond your senses. It's just that objective reality is composed of things that have mental ontologies, such as other minds, mental properties, information, aka thoughts, and so on and so forth.
Well, I want to point out that, like, my next video is going to be on Jung's collective subconscious, and reality essentially is generated from Jung's collective subconscious, and each one of us is like a disassociated alter of that collective subconscious, essentially. So there's an objective world out there.
We're simply seeing that collective subconscious as in a naive materialistic frame of reference.
Yeah.
You just kind of like model it all as mathematics and then equate that math back to something material. That collective subconscious is simply in a very two-dimensional form, naively thought of as Hilbert space. They talk about it in completely instrumental terms up to that point. It's quantum states in Hilbert space that exists beneath space-time, but we're not going to comment on what that means exactly,
Right.
But we do know that it's there. Even they know it's there because there's quantum entanglement linking particles at vast distances that they can't do that inside space-time, so they go beneath it. Subjective idealism basically be solipsism. It could be, though you could have kind of multiple solipsistic insofar as the outside world, with the exception of other minds, basically. So it's close to solipsism, but it isn't solipsism because there are other minds in it. But it's like a shared dream, except that it's almost like the dream is generated by the dreamer and not just by God up top. And so it has
it's generated by everyone.
It's closer to solipsism. Yeah. What we're doing is closer to Leibniz's monadology, I think. So, so it was interesting. I looked into this. Actually, I have it on my computer here. So, here it is. I have it on my desktop, and it's fascinating because there are parallels with stuff in physics that should not be there.
Right.
I mean, the one, of course, is what we have with the whole space-time emerges from quantum cognition model, right? Which then gives you quantum cognition models, inner space, space-time models, outer space, ergo, as within, so without, is the Hermetic logo, right? Or as above, so below. You think of within as above because
right,
that's the supernatural world and so on. But what's interesting, when I got later on into this, they had And
You lag. You're lagging.
do it. But
Okay.
it's absolutely astonishing. Are we
No, you're lagging. That's why. Like you're frozen
trying to open this
on my
thing? My
screen.
computer is awfully slow right now. Okay. PDF copies all at once. Anyway, yeah, that might be why I'm lagging. Yeah, okay. There was a description of a Bloch sphere.
Yeah, so the Bloch sphere, yeah, in a Hermetica, right?
It's called Hermetic. The actual Bloch sphere was described in Kabbalah, and when you put it into the to quantum mechanics, what it was describing was the Hilbert space that the Kabbalah was describing, right?
Yeah, so basically what that is, it's a map. Okay, so it's like a map of what God's. It's
okay,
not like,
yeah, here we go.
It's not like a.
Now, what's fascinating though is, I mean, that is that's something that's, you know, what a Bloch sphere is a just yeah. So they have it's something in quantum computing. They call it a Bloch sphere, and there are qubits arranged. Hello?
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Oh,
you can't hear me?
Hate that.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, sure thing. A whole bunch of them all just opened up automatically. It's ridiculous here. Yeah, so it's also what's going on in God's mind, but it's also, yeah. I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
That's good. Yeah, I could. Yeah, I'm just. I turned off my camera.
Shouldn't be a lag. It's on your end, Kyle.
Yeah, I turned off my camera.
Yeah, so it's also the math of what goes on inside of the wave, not just any math of what goes on in the wave function that they use in quantum. And it was precisely too. Okay, described very precisely, which I find fascinating. I mean, it's not just, you know, a very, very superior they had here, the authors of this book had, but it was very suspicious. Like, I looked at these parallels, and I, you know, they had them all. You know, it wasn't just them making stuff up, because it's always a concern when you deal with a book like this. Is it, you know, is it a pseudoscientific author? And sometimes their stated facts are not what they
the
actually
authors,
state them to be, right?
Like I try to like email him, because I was gonna like have him review my scripts and stuff, but he's like, oh, he told me that like he's an academic and he doesn't want to like be directly involved in my series, even though he wrote a book.
That would explain it, because yeah, they don't want to blow their credibility and all that. Because we can just commentate on it, you know, we're not making we're simply looking at the parallels, not stating whether we think it's real or not, but just looking at it. It's a curiosity, if nothing else.
Right.
So yeah, what's interesting though is I was, you know, afraid that, you know, this is just going to be one of these books where new age fluff, or maybe not that, but like, you know, maybe conspiracy fluff or something like this.
Right.
Like part of, quote unquote, that part of YouTube, or that part of, you know,
conspiracy theories.
Those kinds of crazy areas, right?
Right. And it wasn't.
And so what if all their stated facts are not actually stated facts, but it turns out it was just made up to sell books, right?
Yeah.
But the cool thing is they had it all referenced. So, I mean, you go in the back, and there's, you know, when they got to the part with the parallels with the Bloch sphere,
right,
the quantum computing Bloch sphere with the Sefer Yetzirah, they have it all referenced, and like the references are in the back, and there's like 7 pages of references in the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all like solid academic stuff, not more fluff.
Right.
which I found to be quite fascinating. Yeah, so no, that was the describing what's going on in Hilbert space, right? This quantum computing Bloch sphere representation.
Right.
And then you tie into this next thing called the principle of vibration, right?
Yeah, and that's really
remember that?
you get a lot of weird stuff from that. I'm not gonna lie. You get a lot.
Yeah, that was, a lot. Yeah, that I saw that and I was like, you got to be kidding me. This is it's just plain. I'm gonna try and go over some of them with the audience here.
Go ahead.
I can scroll down there. But okay, for starters, you wonder why is something like vibration in an occult text? I mean, a vibration that seems about as far away from occult as you can possibly imagine, right? I mean, people see vibrations every day, right? There are sound vibrations, light vibrations, mechanical vibrations. I mean, when you shiver when you're cold, that's a vibration. There's nothing occult about that, right? So why is this in this book? Well, then you realize, well, what's at the bottom of what's the physics that is, at the bottom of all this that's explaining why space-time emerges from Hilbert space and
there's different vibrational frequencies as they like to call it. So
yeah, I know, but why vibration at all? Why is that even a relevant concept here?
Because it's the Schrödinger equation. So
it's the Schrödinger equation. It's not just any vibration, it's wave functions. And as you know, wave functions, they're projected into space-time, but tests of Bell's inequalities. Sorry, I'm just repositioning myself here. It's like kind of a bench I'm sitting on. As you know, the Schrödinger equation, what it's describing is not actually in space-time. The wave function can't be in space-time because it would violate special relativity if it was, due to Bell's inequalities and entanglement and all that. Those quantum states are miles apart, or light years apart, even though they affect each other instantly, which would mean FDL communication if it was in space-time, but it's not. And then, of course, though, it has a mathematical projection onto space-time, which we know why you can normalize a wave function or calculate the integral over a domain of space, right? So you call it a probability wave, which has a spatial extension on a XY graph,
Right.
So that's your inside space-time thing. And that then, of course, explains why this ties into this occult science, because it's dealing with this beneath space-time realm. And it's not just any vibration. It's actually the interface mechanism between the physical and the non-physical.
Right.
And then when I look with that in mind, thinking of it as a Schrödinger equation, right? This is the wave function. This isn't just any vibration. If you go to I've seen on the New Age side of YouTube, they kind of talk about this. Remember that video that the Messianic Manic responded to?
Was it Spirit Science? Oh, wait.
Yeah, Spirit Science. And you could very clearly tell that they had no idea what they were talking about, right? It's well, sound vibrations and light, there's nothing about that, guys. That's not a mystery. That's perfectly normal.
Yeah.
It just seems stupid to me. But now you see this, and well, this is actually physics.
Right.
Well, it actually has a frequency of vibration.
There's also higher or lower vibrational frequencies. So there's actually other universes that may exist that have different vibrational frequencies that are.
Oh yeah, I remember that. That was actually Dario showed me that way back. Darth Erebus. He didn't really go much on his channel, but he was more on the Facebook side of it.
Yeah,
and he's a physics guy, and he was mentioning how Verlind was explaining dark matter with these other degrees of freedom, or basically vibratory frequencies or vibratory degrees of freedom,
right?
In Hilbert space, it was almost like he was treating. The analogy in the article that I saw was you could think of the universe as the surface of an ocean, and then dark matter was essentially
it's kind of dark matter is bleeding out from
the leviathans and the monsters and all the stuff that was swimming underneath the ocean. And the reason you couldn't see it in this universe is because it wasn't in this universe. It was swimming underneath the universe, as it were. And it was because gravity is bent space-time, and space-time in turn emerges from Hilbert space. Gravity is affected by things in Hilbert space. You change the underlying Hilbert space, which includes all the other things that go bump in the night, and the here be monsters. so to speak.
Right.
That part of it, all the krakens and so on, those things are underneath the space-time, and they affect the Hilbert space. And if you change the Hilbert space, well, it changes the space-time in our world, which, well, gravity is part of space-time because it's bent space-time. So you then have, this sort of shadow gravity, you might call it.
Right.
Which I thought that was kind of interesting in itself.
Well, it used modified Newtonian dynamics to kind of explain how dark matter kind of does that sort of way. Because, I mean, right now, scientists don't really understand how dark matter exists. But from this framework, we can actually explain dark matter. Right. So. Yeah,
that's their theory, is Hermann Verlin's idea of it's basically shadow gravity from things that are underneath space-time, whole universes and so on. Let's look at some of the more basic parallels, because this is where it really gets interesting. So nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. Now, from a perfectly classical point of view, because they say this was written in, 1908?
Yeah.
It's the book called The Kybalion, and they're comparing the Kybalion to things in Hermeticism, in physics. Kybalion being a Hermetic text, a newer Hermetic text, though. And it was published by the Masonic Lodge of Chicago in 1908, I think they say here. And anyway, the idea is they're comparing all these things to actual known physics. And now, at the time, though, they didn't even have quantum mechanics in 1908.
Oh, yeah, no, that's the thing.
That was 1926. It was Schrödinger. They had that big convention, and Schrödinger's like, this is what's going on. We have the Schrödinger wave equation, and it applies to everything. And actually, they didn't even know it applied to everything first. They had, de Broglie came out. He's like, oh, by the way, this also applies to chunks of matter as well. And so it became kind of, and then I forget who it was, but there was the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, and they applied, that was, part of it as well. And that applies to the vacuum, and they come up with 0-point energy. And at first they didn't even know it applied to everything. They just thought, well, it applies to photons in, the double slit. And then they realized, well, it applies to other things too, like electrons and protons, and everything has one of these, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then it became realized, oh, this is a universal thing. It applies even to the vacuum. But in 1908, they didn't even know about that. They just had classical physics. Well, actually, they had very beginnings of quantum theory with, Planck's constant and all that. But they didn't even realize that, they kind of thought of it as a mathematical trick at the time, and didn't realize they thought of it kind of an enigma. And for the most part, everything was just classical physics, right?
Right. During that time.
And with classical physics, there's no reason to think that everything would vibrate, Yeah. I mean, they knew there was microscopic stuff, but surely stuff has to rest at a time, right? But you get to quantum physics, no, it doesn't rest. It's the whole Heisenberg uncertainty principle. So that by itself is kind of interesting, but by itself, it could just be, a coincidence, right? It's goofy spiritualists at the time who were kind of the forerunners of today's New Agers, and they also got goo goo gaga, and they were, not thinking correctly, and they just, it was just kind of a coincidence they got that right. But let's look closely, because they also there is more parallels than just that. It becomes obvious this is not just some kind of coincidence.
Yeah. No.
So the Kybalion, here's the Kybalion's description. Science does not dare follow the illustration further, but the Hermetists teach that if the vibrations be continually increased, the object would mount up to successive states of manifestation, and would in turn manifest the various mental stages, then on spiritward, until it would finally re-enter the all, which is absolute spirit. So what it's basically saying there is, the more things that you put into the larger the object gets, as it were, which is, think in physics, that means an increase in energy, a Hamiltonian increase in the Schrödinger equation, and the higher vibration. Well, that's exactly what happens. You put in higher energy in the Schrödinger equation, you solve for it, you get a wave function with a increased frequency. The energy actually goes into the frequency term in the Schrödinger equation, the wave function. But then, of course, that could also be kind of a coincidence, because it's, everyone knows that the higher energy something is, the more it vibrates, Right. I mean, if it's a vibration. That by itself it could just be a kind of a continued coincidence, but then it becomes a little more interesting here. Let's see here. The Hermetic teachings are not only is everything in constant motion, movement, and vibration, but that differences between the various manifestations of the universal power are due entirely to the rate and mode of their vibrations. Now that was actually interesting because in the Schrödinger equation, that's actually correct. Everything reduces essentially to energy quanta in the Schrödinger equation.
Yeah.
And everything is defined by a wave function, and the wave function defines all of its properties. Literally.
Well, space-time itself kind of vibrates in a way.
Well, yeah, that we'll get to in a minute because that was farther down the vibration chapter where it starts to get really spooky at that point, right?
Yeah.
We're getting like mid-level spooky right now, but that's where it gets really spooky. So you have increased energy. What was it? Well, basically, the only difference is ultimately in energy values.
Right.
Because the wave function defines the entire physical system, and then in turn, only difference is its differences in wave functions, right? In quantum mechanics, you have this wave function describes this system, this one describes that system over there, this one describes this other system, and they're just different systems that are each described by a different wave function, which in turn you could translate to a Hermetic vibration, right?
Right.
Every thought, emotion, or mental state has its course vibration. Well, that's kind of interesting. That ties into, that's quantum cognition, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I saw that in your video there. Now this one, are you do you have a copy of it there?
Yeah, the Quantum Hermetica.
Yeah.
Which chapter?
5. Oh, you got the hard copy. That's cool.
Yeah.
It's page 54. Show everyone the book, by the way. Or actually,
I have the old version.
Cool.
This is like an older version.
Oh, let's see. They changed the. That's
yeah.
cool. They changed the title, the cover. It looks like.
All right. So yeah, chapter 5
I hope God programmed real aliens into his matrix. I'm bored with this coronavirus shit and one alien invasion. It's hilarious. What would you think would be the better argument for idealism, the philosophical approach or the scientific? Now, that is actually very interesting. I mean, in a very rigorous sense, I have to say the philosophic. That being said, as a practical matter, the philosophical arguments for idealism, they don't seem to, there's such a strong normalcy bias against it, right? You just don't think of the world that way, waking up, right?
Yeah.
That I would have to say that in the end, they kind of cancel out. Like it's both the science and the philosophy are the, it's hard to put one over the other because it's you really need kind of both to argue for it.
Right.
The philosophy really pins it in hard, but then the science part makes it tangible to people. Bernardo
Kastrup does. He kind of argues from both the science and the philosophy, though he argues mainly from the philosophy when it comes to like, because I did a video on, if you watch my video on the basic deriving idealism from the basic facts of reality, that argument is like, it uses just basic facts, like empirical facts of reality, like no quantum mechanics, no reference to like anything else, just like basic facts of reality to get this idealism. And like, in that sense,
you want to hear something funny?
What?
GM. Okay, so you said I'm bored by this coronavirus and want an alien invasion. I hope God programmed real aliens into his matrix. Now, this is kind of cliche because I'm not saying this was the case. Maybe I should do my Giorgio hair or something and puff it all up and make a Giorgio Tsoukalos hair, from the History Channel, and say I'm not saying it was aliens, right? But at the end of the book, what they say is the authors, they don't actually say aliens, but they kind of heavily imply that there was they call it a past intervention into our history, and that was the source of all this knowledge.
Yeah.
So, just get it yourself and you'll see. It's kind of an interesting case they make, but there's no wonder that they want to be private as academics, There's no way, I mean, it's there's no way we can joke about this, but if you're an academic and you're like, there's no way they want to talk about this out loud or say much less say they actually believe it. Of course, we're not saying this is the case either. It's just that this is, part of their book. So, all right. Now, this next part here is kind of interesting. These vibrations, for the most part, of the time, most of the time, in the case of the human mind, built into quantum biological structures in the brain, though as we will see now, they can be non-local as well. Now, this part actually gets very interesting. The Hermetic teachings go much further than do those of modern science. They teach that all manifestation of thought, emotion, reason, will, or desire, or any mental state or condition are accompanied by vibrations, a portion of which are thrown off and which tend to affect the minds of other persons by induction. This is the principle which produces the phenomenon of telepathy, mental influence, and other forms of action and power of mind over mind. Now, of course, we're not going to get into the issue of whether or not telepathy is an actual real thing. I mean, they have, parapsychology studies, and even Sam Harris says that there's apparently some data there worth speaking about. So it's not really it's not really determined. It's not as cut and dry as like the skeptics like to say. That doesn't mean it's real, but apparently it's such that there are some borderline cases, or they're not certain whether it's they're doing the experiment in some clever, some biased way without realizing it, or if there's actual data there. But it's such that it's definitely controversial as to whether psi is a real thing or not. Apparently, if you look at the actual data itself and the papers and literature on it. Now, what was very interesting about this is, let's just suspend that for the time being, the whole debate about that, and just act as though telepathy were real, okay? If telepathy were real, I mean, the whole notion of telepathy is it's not just over a distance; it's like miles away, right? Like twin telepathy. There's two twins are telepathic supposedly, and one happens to be in the area and knows something about the other, right? Even though the guy is like several miles away. Well,
yeah,
or maybe even hundreds of miles away, right? Well, a radio broadcast. Now, let's think about this if this were normal classical vibrations for a second. See a radio broadcast, which is far more powerful than the human mind, right? The human mind, I think, is like 1/8 of a hertz or something like that. The brain waves are like 1/8 of a hertz. It's not gonna do anything. It's not gonna carry anywhere. And then you have, radio stations that broadcast in the megahertz range, and they only carry over, say 50 miles or so on, right? And then the signal, you drive across country and the signal drops. You got to change the channel and so on. Well, so it can't be talking about, sound will drop off much faster than that. It's not talking about classical waves. There's no way it's talking about classical, because those just have the inverse square law effect. They will diminish radially with distance, and that will be that, right? So what's the only way to make sense of this? What does this sound like to you, Kyle?
Non-local quantum mechanics, or
it's non-local.
It has to be behind space-time, because otherwise you're going to run into some problems. So yeah,
if you're just modeling it as classical, there's no way there's no way that telepathy could work by classical means. You're transmitting a radio signal. It's not going to work that way. And the only way to make sense of that is if it's something non-local. And of course, I know just from physics, taking a physics class, quantum mechanics class, back in college there, the wave function, entanglement by definition, is when two or more particles share the same wave function, aka vibration.
Right.
So there you have it. What's describing here is non-locality. But the thing about non-locality is that wasn't even thought up until, Einstein. I think that was 1935 that Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen first came with that paper saying quantum mechanics can't possibly be true, because if it's true, it will have this non-local effect of stuff,
right, and that violates special relativity. So, but if you take
locality, he also thought this can't possibly be real, because the very notion of this is kind of like, it is kind of like magic here,
right?
It's a voodoo doll effect. It's like this can't be real, because this is an absurd conclusion that you can have something way over here and there's nothing in between, causing an effect to happen. If it's being affected by, it has to be close by in space, and yet this quantum entanglement thing is not doing that. And so he says the quantum entanglement is absurd and it can't exist in the real world, therefore quantum mechanics is false. And that was when they first really realized quantum entanglement.
Right.
That was 1935. But this is written in 1908.
Right.
So now this is starting to look like, I mean, this is really sticking out when they're calling these vibrations. The first ones were just like, it could be, fluffy-headed New Agers thinking stupid stuff, having warm fuzzy feelings. I think their warm fuzzy feelings are equivalent to, metaphysical vibrations. But no, at this point now we're getting to, this is actually something that looks like physics, and very specific physics at that. All right, so the next part universal ether, this is vibrations of space. And the universal ether, by the way, at the time, reality had just come out, and they were still used to talking about an ether at the time. But just you think about that, just think about replace it with space time, because that's like the same concept, but like this is their 19th century, early 20th century version of space time.
Right.
Universal ether, which is postulated by science without its nature being understood clearly, is held by the Hermetists to be but a higher manifestation of that which is erroneously called matter. That is to say, matter at a higher degree called by them the ethereal substance. So now that's interesting. What they're saying here is that like the vacuum of space has a vibration. Well, that's the 0-point field. But not only that, they're saying that matter is actually a continuation of the 0-point field, such that when you have, material objects or particles, they're actually bits of fluctuating space-time. Now, what's very peculiar about this is they actually here we go. This is very interesting. The parallels do not stop there, though. Even more interesting and illuminating parallels appear in research connecting space-time to the phenomenon of quantum entanglement. Here we go. This link between space-time and entanglement was discussed in Chapter 2 in greater detail, but we will return to it again briefly. In 2004, Xiao Gang Wen and Michael Levin discovered that space-time behaves as a vast network of entanglements, described collectively as a string network. I would actually remember this. I had this in some of my videos. The space-time itself would have an associated quantum vibration. So basically, there's a surface world, and beneath it, there's this big mesh of like big, huge network of particles being entangled with other particles and so on. And it's like a sea of entanglement, as it were, and everything emerges out of that. And this neatly matches the research discussed earlier, which has space-time emerging from quantum states also. In 2015, Hiroshi Oguri of the University of Tokyo followed this research and successfully described space-time as being built up from quantum entanglement. Again, they have references for, if you guys get the book, which I would highly recommend, this is really fast, if you're interested in this topic. They have, actually, I'll put a link in the description, actually, of the book, in case anyone wants it. I have the Amazon link somewhere. But I'll do that later. So you guys come back to the video.
Right.
Actually, maybe I can do that right now. Let me see if I can find that. While I'm looking for that, its fabric of space-time itself has a vibration. Okay, now details of Win's and Levin's, this is where it gets more interesting. Details of Win and Levin's discovery shed light on another interesting part of the statement from the Kabbalion. The substance of the ether, which in modern terminology we know to refer to as space-time, is actually the same thing as matter at a different state of vibration. Matter at a higher degree of vibration, and it's called by them the ethereal substance. That's the Kabbalion. Now, from New Scientist. The New Scientist article in the discovery states that they also found that string net theory, which is describing space-time from entanglements, naturally gave rise to other elementary parts, such as quarks, which makes up protons and neutrons, and the particles responsible for some of the fundamental forces, such as gluons and the W and Z bosons. That's all the nuclear forces right there. That's very interesting. I mean, they're saying that basically, not only is space-time coming out of this, but it's like almost like the whole thing is a kind of like a holographic inference pattern, and there are certain substructures in the pattern, because when you have like a wave, a Fourier wave, right? It's going to produce. There's going to be. Are you all familiar with Fourier waves, Kyle?
Not the way you just said it.
Okay, have you ever seen like an oscilloscope where they have like a square wave, or a either a square wave or like a triangle wave or so on? You ever seen those?
No.
Like an electronics shop? Okay, basically what they do is they stack waves up and they produce these complex structures, right?
Right.
You can make goofy looking waves, okay? Now, what's interesting with this, though, is, well, let's suppose you make a hologram out of this, right? At first, it's just going to look like a big mess of, like the surface of a swimming pool, right? If you look closely, you're going to see some of these, when you break the wave patterns down, you're going to see smaller structures in there, like, say, the square wave or the triangle wave or so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
Well, basically, what they're saying here is that the protons and neutrons for bosons and so on are actually individual patterns of these waves in the interference pattern.
Oh. Okay, so that kind of explains the
And it all
existence of
emerges from
particles.
this kind of this. It's very intricate structure beneath space-time generating all this stuff, and it's but you're just seeing it as seeing these particles on the
Particles,
surface underneath.
right?
There's this big wave structure. It's not just there, and none of this stuff is like think of objects as being like distinct. Like my mouse here is like distinct, right?
Right.
It's disconnected from everything else. Well, on the surface it is, but beneath it, it's
all
connected to a whole bunch of all kinds of other stuff.
Right.
And it's all entangled. So it then raises the question of, what if I'm doing if I found some little hack to what's going on underneath the space-time, right?
Yeah.
I know like how the stuff on the surface corresponds to what's going on underneath, right? And if I then manipulate the stuff on the surface, right, I can then kind of change the interference pattern underneath, and that will cause something else to appear elsewhere, basically inside the video game.
Right.
Which, of course, kind of looks like magic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You're hacking into the source code, as it were, and changing stuff, and then the program changes.
Right.
But you're doing it by changing what's going on the surface, which is very interesting. Now, okay, so at that point, I mean, this Kybalion described this, right?
It did.
This whole thing of matter, I mean, it's part of the ethereal substance. It's the same. Matter and space-time, or in their language, the ether, 19th century language, the ether, are really the same substance, and there are different states of vibrations. And of course, string theory says the same thing. I remember there was a physicist saying this about string theory, about how matter and space-time are really two manifestations of the same thing, and they're vibrating at different superstring frequencies, right?
Right.
And so now what's crazy here is, well, this is 2004 and 2015. They're describing this. The Kybalion was 1908. What's going on here?
Yeah, it's
this is spooky.
Right.
I don't know either. It's just spooky. I mean, do we go the whole hog and jump on the author's conclusion of I'm not saying it was aliens. I think I just suspend judgment at that point, because I mean it's an enigma, right? Maybe they found some other way to figure this out, or
right.
I'm not gonna go that far just yet. But yeah, and then okay, this is the last one in the series, which is also very fascinating. The vibration of the all. Okay, not only this, but that even the all in itself manifests a constant vibration of such an infinite degree of intensity and rapid motion that it may be practically considered at rest, which is kind of interesting, describing it in contradictory terms there, right? It's infinitely fast, and yet it's at rest. Well, the reason I'm guessing they're thinking of is infinitely fast is because they think, the larger you go up, the higher energy it gets, right?
Right.
More energy to pump in. So you get the energy of the whole universe, and it's going to be going really, really fast, like infinitely fast, right? Well, there's a catch. And we only learned about this now with, recently, or if you could actually derive it from classical physics. I had a video I derived from classical physics too, but if people don't think of it, what's the net energy content of the universe?
Zero.
Which means the frequency vibration is what? Zero.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting here is this was first precisely defined in 1967. This is what's the best, if you're describing the all in translating that into physics, what would that sound like to you?
If I were to translate the all?
Physics terms. Yeah, into physics, what would that sound like to you?
Just the universal wave function, or whatever.
Yeah. So you take the wave function of the universe, and well, what's the wave function of the universe? You get that is a modified Schrödinger equation.
Well, I mean, if you look at the Willy DeWitt equation, it's timeless. It's
timeless, and it equals zero. And so there you go. Timeless cannot, by definition, move. It's stuck. It is what it is, because it can't. There's no time for it to change it.
Right.
You can drop a nuclear bomb on it. It's not going to go in. It's just going to be frozen exactly where it is. And there you go. It's exactly at rest. And so putting this all together, here they have it all listed together at the end of this chapter. Okay, so I'll read this little paragraph, and I want to see what the audience thinks about this. If you guys are still listening, I want to ask your opinion on this. What is interesting to note about the cases given in this chapter is that the teachings on vibration include parallels with physics discovered only after the fact. This includes the general discovery of quantum mechanics and its associated quantum vibrations with the Schrödinger equation, 1926, the non-local nature of these vibrations, 1935, and they have all of these sourced, by the way. and the references in the back. The zero vibratory rate of the universal wave function, 1967. The discovery of space-time as a network of entanglement from which matter is also unified, 2004 and 2015. And the mental nature of these vibrations, 2015, aka quantum cognition. The Kybalion, by contrast, was written decades, and in some cases a full century before, in 1908. Now, of course, the author, they have some, I looked this up and they have some theories as to who wrote it, because I looked at the Kybalion itself and I couldn't figure out the author. It appears it was anonymous. But the claim is, it was published by the Masonic Lodge of Chicago. The only thing they say is the three initiates wrote it. I don't know who the three initiates are. Never explained that. But, yeah, so it was basically the Masons wrote this. And I don't know where they got them. I would assume that they have their... you got to become one of them in order to, which I don't intend to do, to figure out their source material and where they got this stuff from back in 1908. And they were claiming it comes from, way back to Hermes or whatever, mythology, mythic times or whatever. But, yeah, so what do you guys make of this? I mean, this is all in 1908. I want to hear from the comments if anyone's still listening, hopefully they are. The comment section, you can, if you watch this later on, you can tell us what you think too. So we have all these parallels with the physics, including this whole notion of emergent space-time with the, with putting the quantum cognition into it, of this as within, so without thing, tied with these, as well as all these vibrations, and then the quantum computing Bloch sphere. How did they get all this stuff in 1908 when we only discovered after the fact, and sometimes after the fact? I guess they're either typing or they're not saying anything at the moment. I mean, maybe they all tuned out. I don't know.
They say that you always know. Okay.
What?
So we have Newton and all of his other Freemasons have always known this. Or Nazi UFO technology was channeled by the Cthulhu Society.
The Thule Society.
Yeah.
Cthulhu Society. Newton and all the other Freemasons have always known. Okay, so here's the question. Yes, they've always known, right? But the thing with it is they shouldn't think about, let's suppose, Newton knew this, right? If Newton knew this, how could he have known it? They didn't have, we needed particle physics to even come up with superstring theory. We needed, particle physics to come up with quantum mechanics. I mean, not very much of it, but just enough to know that photons and electrons exist, right? Like rudimentary particle physics. That only appeared in the 20th century. And some of the more advanced stuff, you needed, relativity as well, which you needed telescopes to discern, and, airplanes to fly around the world with, and so on. You needed a lot of advanced technology and you need the infrastructure associated with an advanced technology. So how did they get this knowledge? Does anyone have any thoughts on this? I guess this accusation is apparently Nazi UFO technology was channeled by the Thule Society. Okay, here's the question. Where did the Masons come to know this from? I mean, they shouldn't have known this. There's not the technology to derive this knowledge. What?
They have access to Hilbert space.
Could they have Hilbert? That's possible. But how do they have access to Hilbert space? We only knew about Hilbert space recently. I mean, relatively recently. Definitely after this thing was written.
Nazis got their advanced knowledge from channeling with aliens.
Okay, Luke Schrader says divine inspiration, as far as I'm concerned, call it God or what have you, but end result is the same. Entanglement. Well, entanglement with what though? I mean, if you're just because your mind works by entanglement, you have to entangle with something that has this knowledge, right? This is very specific.
I think they were told by aliens. That's one possibility.
That's what you think.
Yeah.
Oh, Kyle, would you? I don't know where this is in the book. I forget where this was. I think it might have been in chapter 3. They actually just talk about the nature of angels and demons, right?
Yeah. Because I haven't gotten into.
And they made something. They said something very interesting though about
let's see.
They said something that was very interesting about angels and demons though, and it relates to aliens in a very interesting way. Like, and not the way that, like, you'll end up with a lot of the Christians on the one side who will say, see a UFO, and you'll say, well, it's demons that did it, right?
Right.
Demons did everything, right? It's always demons. You can't explain it. It doesn't fit your worldview. Therefore, demons did it, and it's kind of an annoying, explanation, because it's like, well, that just explains everything, doesn't it, right? But then on the flip side of it, let's suppose that you are like the subcategory of atheist who is also not completely skeptical about stuff and kind of has a wild side. I mean, I've seen some atheists that are really into like weird alien stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not a lot of them, but like there's a subsection of them that they don't believe in a God, but they like believing in all kinds of other weird stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so they'll say that, well, the stories of angels are really just old accounts of aliens, right?
Right.
Okay, so those are the two views, right? The aliens are just demons, and everything that we call angels and demons are just aliens, right?
Yeah.
Those are your two views. But now, from what I understand, and you probably know this a bit better than me because I only skimmed it, it appears that they have a different alternative here, don't they? That it doesn't really fit into either one of those camps very neatly, or it fits into both of them in a very weird way.
It's where they're both.
Could you describe that?
Yeah. So basically, angels are aliens and demons are aliens. Like, they're both the same. They're not separate. Like, technically, the theists and the atheists are right when the atheists are right when they say that there are aliens, but then the theists are also right when they say there's angels and demons. They're both right in that sense.
But how does that work? Because I mean, to your normal mind, that's like you like. Remember that one scene from The Sorcerer's Apprentice where the kid is asking Nicolas Cage. So I don't understand. Is it science or magic? Right? The sorcery science or magic? And then Nicolas Cage says yes and yes.
It's both.
And you're like what? What do you mean it's both?
Yeah.
How could it possibly be both? I mean, aliens are physical beings that come from a planet and so on, right? They have technology and so on. They have biology.
Well, the
angels
thing
and demons are spirits.
Well, yeah, but
and they exist outside space.
Yeah, but here's the problem with that is, in relativistic quantum mechanics, you have like this wave function collapse, right? So from their perspective, they're physical beings. From our perspective, they're non-physical beings.
Right, and that was, I guess, what they're kind of talking about is the whole dark matter business, right?
Right.
Those dark matter planes, they contain angels and demons, essentially.
Right, and I've actually seen how... Right, I've seen like Ancient Aliens a lot of times, and they've talked about how like maybe aliens are not physical of how we're physical. Maybe they're like non-physical, like they're out there in dark matter, and that could explain, like the Fermi paradox, for example. Like maybe it's very possible that maybe the aliens are already here, right? Because they're angels and demons.
Funny.
Maybe that's why we can't find aliens out there. So
what's interesting though is the physics of Hilbert space, right? Which is the physics of dark matter. Well, what does Hilbert space give rise to?
Physical space-time. So
physical space-time and matter, right?
Right.
So if it's the same kind of stuff, right? Same fundamental. It's like basically Leibnizian. Quantum mechanics is basically describing Leibnizian metaphysics with physics, okay? Whereas Newtonian mechanics is describing Democritean physics, metaphysics with physics, right? So basically what it is it's a different substrate. You're dealing with Leibniz's monads rather than Democritus's atoms in the void. And at root, though, the physics, the fundamental, very fundamental physics is the same. So it even applies, it's a Hilbert space, and if it applies to Hilbert space, it applies to everything that emerges from Hilbert space, including these other hypothetical realms that are causing this dark matter. Which means that these other realms, they should have, they're basically the same physics as ours. They're just, the only real difference is a change in vibration.
Right. That's the whole point is angels and demons, they can interact within our physical reality. From our perspective, they are non-physical, but from their perspective, they're physical, just like from our perspective, we're physical. That's how I see it. So
it's
they're
interesting
both.
because in terms of how physical it is actually saying here that it produces central forces, just kind of a mathematical thing. I mean, it's natural that central forces would arise because there's no preferred direction for a force to act in, right? And the force just emerges from quantum fields, and so the only thing it would do is start at a point and converge, right? Just what it would logically do. And so because of that, you'll end up with the things that central forces produce, such as planets, stars, so on and so forth, and you'll have gravity, right? Or electromagnetic forces, which then produce atoms. And if you notice this, let's just drop the whole discussion of the whole alien business for a second, right? Let's go to strictly Christian, strictly religious. Think about there are descriptions of angels and demons in the Bible that are. Here's an example. In the desert, the Israelites ate what, right? The bread of angels, right? Manna. This is the bread of angels, though, which means angels ate it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But wait a minute. Angels ate bread. But you think about what that entails for a second. And it's the same bread that we're eating. If you're eating it, you're looking at it in terms of biochemistry, you're digesting it, and you're breaking it down into biochemicals that even have carbon atoms in them and so on, and it's going into your body, right?
Yeah.
Well, that would mean that the manna has carbon atoms in it and has biochemicals in it and so on, right? So when the angels eat it, there's no reason to eat it if you don't digest it. What are they absorbing? Carbon atoms.
Right.
And other biochemicals. I mean, what is that?
It's physical.
That sounds like biology to me.
Right.
And then, of course, IP has a different view of this. He says it's, I don't really buy that the whole notion of before the flood, it was the sons of God were just rebellious kings or whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to make sense with the whole comparative mythology and all as well as just not just that, but like the term used there only shows up when they describe angels elsewhere in the Bible, right?
Well, John Walton actually changed.
So they say it as
well.
women, right?
Yeah. So John Walton actually changed. He changed his view, so now he's against IP's view. So
maybe IP is going to change it once he reads a Walton's update.
Maybe, but I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. Okay. So we have what is it? We have this whole notion of basically they're having sex with humans, right?
Yeah.
And that's a biological process. That's a very biological process. That doesn't get any more biological than that. And then here's another one. Let's look. Wonder what Johannan thinks of Kant's refutation of Berkeley's idealism. All right, we'll get to that in just a second. I have a very good response to that, actually. But and you'll have to accept it as well if you think that science is at all possible. Like science will not be possible if you basically have to reject science entirely if you think that Kant refutes idealism straight up. Yeah, angels have wieners. It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
I almost get a thought of was it Ridley Scott's Prometheus engineers? When GM said angels have wieners, I'm thinking to myself of Ridley Scott's Prometheus engineers,
right?
And humans before the flood or something. It's funny. All right, so okay, yes, and then also, what about this? This is a very interesting thing. In Genesis, something tempts Adam and Eve, right?
Right.
A snake,
well,
right?
It wasn't a snake. It was more like a chaos creature.
It's like a serpent, right? It's like a serpent.
Right. It's not like it's not a snake per se. Like how it's more like a serpent. Like if you look at the original language, it's a serpent.
Nakash, like the term Nakash.
Not only that, but like I think, and God was also there as well, but he was in it.
I know about it. So the term Nakash has the same root word to Nagas in the Darrow mythology. They call it the same actual root is Nakash and Nagas mean the same thing. You know what Nagas is in Hindu mythology?
What?
It's so-called serpent race.
Oh, okay.
It lives deep underground and so on. And but it's a little bit different looking. It has like arms and so on, right?
Yeah.
So now the thing with that is well, okay, not a snake per se, but a serpent. Well, that's a reptile, correct? Reptiles have scales. That's a biological feature. It's not just it's an evolved feature, right? Well, sex for that matter is also an evolved feature. And so you're dealing with something that what the Bible is describing is very biological. We have, in all these accounts, the manna, the angels, is biological sound. And yet on the flip side of it, if you think about it in a conventional religious framework, well, no, it can't be because it's spiritual and supernatural. It's outside space-time and it's mental, right? And so these things seem to be contradictory. And you look at this and what they're saying is, no, they're the same thing. They're basically aliens from different, domains of Hilbert space. And what's kind of interesting, and I noticed this because I saw a dark matter map way back. If you ever notice, actually, a dark matter, the reason they speculated it in the first place, I forget
it's a gravitational influences between galaxies.
Yeah. The reason they first suspected it is they noticed that galaxies were flying apart, were flying far too fast. They thought they'd be flying apart by now.
Right.
Semyon Namas, this is kind of my next video at the moment. I have another script, but I have a full-time job right now, and it's a night shift job, and so it kind of messes with my I end up sleeping far too long because it messes with my circadian rhythm. But I'll try and get another video out as soon as I can. But for now, this is
if you want to, I have a lot of videos.
Interesting topic. Oh yeah, go to Christian Idealism. He's a really good guy, and he's got really cool. I'm going to put his link in. This is the updated YouTube. It's been hard for me to update that recommended channels list, but I want to put you on there as soon as I can. What? Oh, no, I'm not actually familiar with it as much. I know him a bit. What?
Oh, Bernardo
his
Castro.
Views. Yeah, I don't know, honestly. I feel kind of embarrassed about this. I've been out of the loop for a little while, and I know him. I actually talked to him, several times. We kind of conversed about stuff, but I have to discuss with him more. If you become a millionaire, I'll donate to you so you can buy this full time on buying multiple lottery tickets. What, is he wanting to use like psychic powers to win the lottery or something? What is this? Is this like the 21st century version of Voltaire ringing the French lottery? And all right. Okay, so back with this topic here, it was very curious because so the dark matter, the reason that they noticed that the dark matter was working the way that it was, the reason they suspected in the first place is they thought that they noticed that galaxies were spinning too fast and that they should have spun apart by now if there wasn't some additional gravitational force holding them in. And so that's where they got the notion of dark matter. But that means, though, that the dark matter, where is the dark matter not then? It'd be intergalactic space, right?
Because
there's a whole lot of intergalactic space with no
what? Because there's no planet. Because here's gravity is supposed to be defined in terms of planets and matter, right? Like mass.
Mm-hmm.
Or the bigger the star is, the more gravity it has. Well, in this case, dark matter, there is no planets there to give that gravitational pull, so they call it dark matter because it's there, but it's not there in this.
The dark matter is always clustered in the galaxy, though, which is very interesting because what that would imply is that, with maybe some exception of some weird place where there might be a cluster of dark matter elsewhere, it appears that for the most part, the dark matter is clustered up in the same place. So there would actually be, in that hypothetical other universe, there would actually be another Milky Way galaxy. It's not exactly. I mean, it's a different universe, but in a way, it's almost like a different version of our universe because it would have the Milky Way galaxy, and I'm guessing it would also probably map to other structures as well. Like spiral arms would have individual spiral arms, and maybe even down to stars, right? So it may be that you have the same star systems in this other universe, but they're just like different versions of it, and they might be displaced a little bit or something. Like maybe a milliparsec off or something like that, which to us would be, it would take like a light day or something, light day or two. You wouldn't notice it right away, but it would be, it'd be out there. And it would be essentially, I mean, if you go to the other universe, you might even see the same constellations and all that. The universe, I mean, if what they implying with the dark matter is real. So it's very interesting because what they're describing here is essentially, I mean, the only real difference is that it's, I mean, I remember the concept of a phase cloak. You've seen it like on Star Trek and Stargate. That one episode of the Next Generation where they had the Enterprise, they had the Federation was banned by treaty law from using cloaking devices, right? The Romulans.
Yeah.
And they had this one episode where there was someone high up in Starfleet that was experimenting with phase cloaking illegally, okay? And the whole thing was done under the cover, and they had this starship that was embedded inside of an asteroid. Like, how did that even get there? And the reason was that it was phase cloaked. And they show the same thing in Stargate where they have that episode, they call them the Ritu. There's a whole race that's off phase, but they're right there on the same planet, essentially. And they could, the Tok'ra had this device they could scan it with, and they could see there are these what look like, you know, kind of the bug aliens from what was that? Starship Troopers. It almost kind of looked like that, but yeah. So they had those, and they were essentially right there, but they were phase cloaked, right? And so what they're basically saying here is that we're calling. Think about a phase cloaked being for a second, right? What would that look like? Almost. I saw the movie Invisible Man recently.
Oh, that yeah.
And it was a science fiction movie, and at the end it got really kind of thriller-like. But the first, it had all the trappings of a haunted house movie.
But it wasn't a haunted. It wasn't haunted.
But it felt like a haunted house, didn't it?
Right at first, but then.
So what if it was not just a cloak? What if it was also a phase cloak?
Right.
It kind of gets blurry there as to whether it's being haunted by a ghost or whether it's being inhabited by a physical being that's just phase cloaked, right?
Right.
And so it's really weird because, well, you have these on the one side, these demons and angels. Other side, you have, you know, Captain Picard doesn't count because he's a human, right? But say Worf. Worf is an alien, right?
Yeah.
Worf is on the the USS Enterprise as it's phase cloaking in to get inside of. They temporarily, for the circumstances, had to use the phase cloak even though it was illegal, and they reported the Romulans explaining the whole incident. They had the phase cloak to get inside of the asteroid to temporarily Worf is phase cloaked, right?
Right.
And he's not human, and he exists. Technically, he's outside of our physical space-time, which, according to Hilbert space, is quote-unquote, you know, it's mental and spiritual, right?
Right.
So how would you categorize him? Is he an alien, or is he an angel or a demon?
Both. Or
the same thing with the Asgard. The Asgard on Stargate. They had a device, a little device they could use to actually it's like a portable phase cloaking device. Say Thor has been phase cloaking, right? Or Heimdall has been phase cloaking. Well, technically, what is it? Is he an alien or an angel or a demon?
Both.
Isn't that bizarre?
Yeah, it is.
If this thing ever kind of gets out there, it's going to troll a lot of people.
It's kind of like making like an Invisible Man, like how at first it was like a spooky, like mysterious sort of thing, but then as you watch it, it gets less and less mysterious, and that's kind of what I want to do with religion, where at first it seems mysterious, and it eventually gets less and less mysterious, and this
is going to upset a lot of people.
I know. That's why I'm doing it.
Would it be funny if there were phase cloak aliens all around us, and that was angels and demons?
Yeah.
You know what's hilarious about this? Because I don't know what the statistics on believing in aliens are, but last I heard, like the statistics on believing, like the devil, for example, were like 60% of Americans believe in the devil.
Yeah.
So it's like that is, even though it's kind of crazy, as it were, so to speak, it's not crazy at the same time because it's a predator cloak, yeah. At the same time, believing it was not crazy because it's socially acceptable to do so. I know this is the newer one, not the Kevin Bacon one from like 2000, 2001. Everything, it would just be patterns of consciousness, and just like everything else.
Right.
Yep. So, I think it's the link. They had an older link, and it's older. I think I can find it. 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 I think I can hold on here. Yeah, the newer one has like, I think it's like a pyramid sycamore cover. All right, there's a link here somewhere. This is the blog someone sent me a while back. I'm trying to find the link. The new link, rather. Oh, here we go. This is the. I think this one has a new link. I think. I'll just copy paste this. Why is it not? Oh, give it a second. I take my computer. I don't know. Maybe everything's got a D these days. Yeah, so it's you should do a video on this part of it actually, because this would be really interesting.
Well, about what? About
the whole notion of angels and demons actually basically being
that's gonna be
aliens and vice versa.
That's gonna be my last video in the series, probably, because I'm gonna do an epilogue and that'll kind of close off. But yeah.
Gotcha. Maybe do something This would be totally, because I mean, think about this, right? So if you ever read the Book of Enoch, which is like the account of the Genesis 6 thing with the remember the sons of God marrying the daughters of men and all that. Okay, well they have and it's not just that, they have like a whole bunch of Hebrew apocrypha, and even some of it, like there's one called the Book of Giants that actually it's Hebrew apocrypha with some of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but it overlaps with like Sumerian and Mesopotamian, like Akkadian mythology, like Gilgamesh, right? It has Gilgamesh in it, believe it or not. Yeah, but it also talks about the Watchers and this big council of the giants, and they're all talking about the flood coming, because one of them had this dream about the flood, and it's basically it's describing the dream about the flood coming. And it's kind of interesting because the Watchers, when you look at the Book of Enoch, they call them fallen, and what they do is they give humans in exchange for having sex with women, they give them a whole bunch of advanced knowledge.
Yeah.
Including, and they specifically mention categories of occult knowledge as well as various technologies.
Spooky.
Yeah, it's spooky because, I mean, what does that sound like to you? It sounds like it's, I mean, if you put this into the angels and demons are face cloaked aliens trope, this sounds right up there with the History Channel. I'm not saying this is the case, but no, what's really hilarious about this is, okay, look at this way. Remember what IP said in his video on the Nephilim?
Yeah.
About how the mainstream theological view, like of Bible scholars, was that, and IP even prefaced the video by saying he's arguing for the minority view, correct?
Right.
The majority view is that these were angels in the Book of Enoch, right?
Right.
Well, now this uses basically a quantum idealist framework to kind of flesh in the details of what those angels would look like, right?
Right.
And when you do that, it starts to look like something a little different, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Something which is not very popularly, believed, right?
Right.
Which I think is going to be very funny, because when if this goes viral, like in the religious community, this is going to cause a humongous social upset in more than one way, I think. Like, well, it's going to troll a lot of people.
It's going to troll both sides, essentially. Both religion and...
Oh, yeah, it's going to troll them both. Because, I mean, like, there's aliens all over. I mean, it's going to be, like, religion, which they're afraid of aliens are demons and so on, right? And it's like, that's all, like, push that out.
Yeah.
And yes, there's still demons in this case, but we've just turned it into looking like a History Channel episode all of a sudden,
Right.
And all of a sudden you have a large percentage of, religious people believing in basically History Channels kind of sounding stuff, right?
Right.
Like, and not just, fringe religious people, but like mainstream, But then on the flip side, it's going to troll like the atheists, because they're like, wait a minute, these aliens that were supposed to debunk religion, you mean to say it's going to troll all sides?
Yeah, pretty much.
So you have anything else here that has interesting physics parallels that you saw? So you read the
No,
whole
I
thing.
mean, this series is gonna take a while. It's gonna be my longest series ever. I'll probably have, by the time I'm done with this, probably like 20 videos at least, because there's a lot to
It
get
could be
into.
open-ended. I mean, you probably want to go into like individual topics. Like some of these are like they stop. I noticed like in 2 points they stop to actually just have separate chapters for individual topics.
Right. Well,
And
I'm
there are
gonna,
individual topics in some of the individual
depending on the topics, I'll probably
the
do
regular.
like one video for 2 topics or 3 topics or whatever. Like I'm gonna have a whole video dealing with astral
Right.
projection in the astral plane. So we'll see.
Yeah,
But yeah, my ultimate goal
this
is
is going to troll.
I want to provide, because here's the problem within society or academia. It's either you're super religious where you accept all the weird stuff like supernatural entities, but then you can't really explain them with science, right? Like it's mysterious. Or you're the atheist where you just simply reject all of it. Well, for me, I want to accept it, but at the same time I want to provide an explanation of it in the same way of how like Stranger Things would provide an explanation of, their supernatural entities and the upside down, right? So it's the same sort of thing I'm doing here.
Yeah, that's kind of cool because I noticed Stranger Things. I've seen that all the episodes this far, and I've noticed the material in it is very like you can explain all the quote unquote weird stuff in it, like including the upside down and how the upside. Notice how the upside down was opened.
Right.
It was 11 psychic abilities, right? Which is kind of interesting because it means that she was open. It's something mental about it, yet it's also physical when you open it, which is exactly like this quantum idealism framework.
Right. Well, it's funny because
I call the upside down the shared inner space.
when the show came out, I should say, there's actually a few Christian apologists that kind of responded to it and said that, oh, well, this isn't really a representation of supernatural things because we can explain it with science, right?
I saw that.
I think Jay Warner Wallace, he wrote a blog about this. I don't know if it was him or someone else, but he posted it on Facebook, and I was very disappointed because it's like, well, you have like literally supernatural entities in this TV show that can be explained by science, but yet you won't.
so much so that I actually made a video on. And that was my, sometimes I like to use stuff from popular shows to make my videos more interesting, and I actually used tons of Stranger Things because of how very neatly it blended with the material.
Right. So for me, my main goal is to right. So my main goal is to explain all religion through this like Hermetic framework or whatever, and that's what I'm gonna do.
That would troll people as well.
Yeah.
It's just like remember when Star Wars Episode 1 came out and they had the whole midi-chlorians thing explaining the Force?
Yeah.
And the fans hated it.
Oh, because it wasn't. Yeah.
Because the Force is like this mystical-y type of thing that you don't want it explained, right?
Right.
And now it has like an explanation of sorts, right? It's mediated by midi-chlorians, and you have a midi-chlorian blood count and so on, and it shows you how much force power you have and so on, right? Well, I think that's religion. I think there's a psychological thing where they don't want this explained very much, like because it messes with the formula, as it were,
Right.
They don't like that just because the very notion of being explained is somehow icky or something, it kind of messes it up for them. But I mean, well, we got a problem here. It needs to be explained because, I mean, if it's not explained, you got this situation. Atheism is just going to grow. I mean, you're going to end up like Western Europe eventually, and it's going to be sorry. Right. It is kind of ridiculous, actually, to just permanently keep something unexplained, like why it's like trying to like push against the progress of the growth of human knowledge and all that. And it just doesn't sit right with. So,
yeah.
So all for right. This episode though, show podcast, is there any other like physics parallel in this? They were interesting.
There's a lot. It gets into free will. It gets into like anything the occult, anything doing with the occult. It also gets into the fallen state. And
Whoa. Oh, actually, oh, wow.
the physics of it's pretty crazy.
Okay, go to page 45 to 46.
It's 47 for me, but it's fine.
Go to 45 or 46. The other thing they're talking about.
Fallen. Oh, before. Okay.
What's the topic? Yeah, 47 is the fallen state.
The pentagram.
Fallen state. Oh, cool. What are they? This is. I remember making a video. I mean, I was just making physics videos, apologetics videos. And I made physics videos, and then I made like philosophy videos, and sometimes politics videos, and so on. And I'm just interested in emergent space-time. But they're using. I remember this actually because there was. You take a they call it causal dynamical triangulations, right? And they were building up space-time from pentatopes, which are basically four-dimensional tetrahedrons. So you like a three-dimensional space 4 points, which means you triangulate a five-dimensional pentatopes. And for some reason, I remember this specifically in the. Oh, they actually have it referenced here as well. Apparently, the four-dimensional pentatope is actually projected down to 2 dimensions, and it produces a pentagram.
Yeah, well, you can
causing stuff to emerge in or out of space.
Well, here's the problem: you can use it to like mess with Hilbert space, and that can cause a lot of supernatural miracle things within this reality. But it says don't do it.
It's so dangerous.
Yeah, you don't want to mess with it.
Good. Yeah, don't try this at home.
Yeah.
I disagree, Johan. There will always be things outside of the purview of science. Well, in a sense, yes. Okay, so this is kind of a bit more nuanced. I shouldn't say that everything is inside of science because that's not quite appropriate. But I do think that metaphysics and science have the same domain. They have the same territory. They're using different maps for the same territory. So, for example, you have philosophy is asking different kinds of questions than science is asking, right? And science will philosophy will give back answers that science cannot give you back, simply because it's not asking those. I mean, for example, let's look at ethics. Is something good or bad? Right?
Yeah, it's not a scientific question.
You can't answer that with science because it's not a scientific kind of question. That doesn't mean that you can't explain the value states that someone is having with. You can't describe those, say, with quantum cognition or just regular mental processing, right? Like when they're thinking about values and so on, right? So the thing with it is that it's describing, or here's a better one: the science is describing, it's studying the structure of it, and philosophy is getting at the a priori aspect, which is kind of semantic content. So in that sense, yes, because they're asking different questions that they can only ask kinds of questions that. I mean, the whole notion of how they work restricts them to asking certain kinds of questions and not other kinds of questions, right? So in that sense, I would say that, yes, scientism is wrong. That being said, the physics and metaphysics have the same domain. They use different maps for the same territory, basically. So everything that exists can be accessed in some way through science, even though not all questions you can ask about that thing can be answered by science, because some of them are just in the wrong category to ask with science.
Right.
That makes sense. Kind of
there's an intersection between them. You need both.
Some people say,
you still there?
You had the base 12 Sumerian counting. Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello?
Okay. Yeah, we're good.
Okay. A GM is going to derive the 144,000 from the base 12 Sumerian counting system, which they say they got from aliens. Don't atheist stuff.
All right. Okay.
I'm gonna definitely get that link up. I'm having a hard time getting the link up for right now for some reason
Yeah, it's
with
fine.
the
But
Quantum Hermetica, but I'm going to definitely get you that link in the description later
yeah,
on, so you guys can come back and.
Can you guys watch?
Wait a minute. What?
Anyone watching, just you can go check out my channel, Christian
Hello?
Idealism. It's gonna be really nice. Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you.
Okay. No, because what I was saying is, for those watching, if you guys want to check out Quantum Hermeticism, you can check out the book, but you can also check out my video series that I'm working on. It's on my YouTube channel.
He's got a really cool video series.
Yeah.
Oh, there was one on polarity too, which was kind of interesting. The principle of polarity, they bring in the whole change of vibration changes the mental state thing, but it's like on a scale. Like, so you it's not trying to change it to anything; it'll change it to something else. It was interesting because they used quantum smell as a direct analog of this. You change the vibration of the sense perception, of the sensory receptor in your the atom that's locking into the sensory receptor in your nose. And apparently what it does is it causes a different smell. And it's literally, that's actually mainstream science now. It's known that this is the case. Your olfactory system is affected by changes of vibratory states of these different isotopes in molecules. And it produces a different mental state, aka a different specifically referring to a different smell. And it's kind of cool because that was literally, they use that as the example in the polarity chapter, but that literally is the Hermetic principle of polarity, which is kind of cool. All right, so so go check out Christian Idealism on YouTube. I'm going to include a link when I get this thing up here. They dope the rats with lithium isotopes. I have not been getting any lithium recently. That's another good example. It's different vibrations cause different mental states of maternal instinct, apparently. So yeah, this is check out the Quantum Hermetica on Amazon and check out Christian Idealism of Kyle Alander on YouTube, who's making a whole video series on this. So is there anything else you want to say, Kyle?
No, I'm good.
Okay, and I did mention I'm going to include both the links in the description when this thing is up, so come back and check those guys out. And actually, I wonder if I can possibly post it in the... Why am I having such a hard time getting this thing open? This is ridiculous.
You can post a video on Facebook if you want.
Yeah, I think I'm going to close some other pages, though, so I can get this thing set up. Please tell me this is the right one. Yeah, it seems they changed their cover a couple times. Yeah, this is the right one. Here we go. All right. So here we go, guys. I'm going to put this in a comment. And I'm going to go. Would you, Kyle, put your channel in the too?
Wait, what?
Your channel. Put your channel link in the comments so you can go to your channel. I'll put the description too, but.
All right, hold on. I have to switch.
There you go. Oh, what's interesting, at the very end of the book, they actually said something about the history. Manetho was saying, because Manetho was the historian of ancient Egypt, he's like the Egyptian Herodotus, basically. So I mean, you'd still take it with a grain of salt today because it wasn't kind of modern standards of scholarship. That being said, he was about as authoritative as a historian could be during his time. He's like the official historian of Egypt at the time. And he was actually saying that the Hermetic knowledge derived from, it was preserved over the flood. There was like a great flood that was, so like 9,000 years before his time. And he put, all this stuff was put in these pillars or whatever. And then it was preserved across the flood, which is kind of interesting because then it would fit into the whole, Enoch account of this stuff all being like pre-flood knowledge or something. Which, if nothing else, this would make for a good novel or a movie, I think, if someone made something on this. All right. The one that wiped out Atlantis. I guess it would be a good about time, a proper time frame, I suppose. I mean, Manetho was 3rd century BC, so 9,000 years before his time.
All right. Well,
all right,
I gotta go.
All right. Well, that's a good one. Have a good one, guys. It's a good episode, Kyle. And maybe we'll have you back on here sometime. All right. Yep. See you guys later. Any last words, Kyle?
Nope. I'm good.
All right. Ending broadcast. See you guys. Is it ending? No, it's frozen. This is ridiculous. Come on, end.
It should be ending.
It should be ending. I'm clicking on it. Okay, here we go. Wait, no. It almost ended. This is annoying. I don't know what this is today. End broadcast. Here we go.